new feature on Zoom. So
Yeah.
hi, welcome to Data Grounded Discernment for Capital Campaign Planning. My name is Ken Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the FaithX Project, an Episcopal priest, a two-time church planter. I've written a book or two, and one of my passions has been studying the demography of the church. With me is Mary Francis, who's the FaithX Senior Consultant, and she'll be working the chat room and keeping track of people's questions. So if you have questions, please drop them right in there. We have a couple of special guests today. We have Leslie Pendleton, who's with Core Capital Campaigns. And we also have Kay and David Doherty from St. James Episcopal Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. St. James is a client of Core Capital Campaigns and Leslie, and Kay is a member of the vestry, and David served on their strategic missional planning process. So just a little bit of a quick background on us if you haven't been to one of our webinars before. FaithX is a nonprofit consulting, research, and resource development ministry. Our mission is to help congregations survive and thrive in turbulent times by understanding and engaging the stories of the communities they serve. We picked that 4 years ago. We didn't know COVID was coming, but so we've been in through some turbulent times together. So during this webinar, you'll see us using a couple of resources that are available through FaithX. One is called a Neighborhood Missional Intelligence Report. That's an interactive infographic report that provides information on the population and the characteristics of the community around the church or faith community. We'll be using some demographic maps from a platform called MapDash for Faith Communities, courtesy of our affiliate, Data Story, and some other sources. We'll be using story map technology. That's what you see us using as our presentation deck right now. That's from Esri, another partner organization of ours. And what we'll be basically teaching today as part of this process is a concept we call data grounded discernment, which is an interactive process. Just to tip our hat to our co-sponsors for this is the Gathering of Leaders, the Episcopal Church Foundation, and Core Capital Campaigns. So here's what we're going to be covering. We have introduction and overview, which we're already right into the midst of. We'll be talking about the purpose of this kind of discernment. We'll be talking after that about the process, and then we'll open it up for discussions and Q&A. During that time, you may hear either Kay or David or Leslie just pop in to verify information that we've shared. We are kind of the trail guides in this process, the data Sherpas, if you will. We help you determine what the questions are that you need to answer and bring the data to the table, but ultimately you all have to verify the truth of that by getting out in the community, and that's why we have special guests like this. So let's talk about for a minute the purpose of what we call data grounded discernment for capital campaign planning. There's a quote that I like to talk about with this, and that's from Soichiro Honda. It's the guy who created the Honda and still runs that business. He says that vision without action is a daydream, and action without a vision is a nightmare. And so what we found is that the how and what of capital campaigns is the easy part. I put it in quotes. It's hard work, but it's easy compared to other things. Like there are hundreds of guides out there, people and books and pamphlets on how to run capital campaigns. And most congregations come into the capital campaign process, knowing what they want to construct, renovate, or buy, or at least they think they do. The hard part and the road less traveled is getting to the why that you're doing a capital campaign. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Because unless you ground your what in a why, and when by that we mean a clear and deeply understood vision and mission, that your capital campaign efforts may turn out to be an exercise in tweaking the status quo. And even if you think you know the why, unless it's really grounded in an assessment of your congregation and an analysis of the community around you, it's going to be infected by your own biases and blind spots. We call this the Lake Wobegon effect, because we all think we're above average. The children are above average. The women are strong, and the men are handsome. So anyway, that's why we think it's a good thing to do this, because if you don't really get clear on the why, you've missed an opportunity to see God's hand at work in the world around us, and then from that, discerning what God is doing in the community around us and what God is calling us to do and be as a part of that. And then also to learn how to better engage your congregants and the people of your neighborhoods. So talk a bit about the process here, just to overview it a little bit. We divide the whole capital campaign process into two phases. One is we call missional discernment, and then the other part of it we call planning and implementation. And you can see right from the start that we're looking at this as a cyclical process. So it starts with vision and mission. By clarifying your congregation's vision and mission, the hint with this is that they are not necessarily the same thing. A vision is a clear statement of what God's calling you to be, and a mission is the ways that you use to get there. We move from that into looking at a congregational vitality assessment. You're basically looking at your congregation's strengths and weaknesses as it applies to vitality and sustainability of your congregation. The next step is what we call a neighborhood missional assessment. And what we're doing in a neighborhood missional assessment is to identify the missional opportunities and challenges that are emerging in your community. And then the fourth step is setting priorities, taking the missional opportunities that you found and the missional challenges that you found, and compare those to your strengths and weaknesses so that you can leverage your strengths to engage the missional opportunities and challenges you see, and also to leverage your strengths to address the weaknesses that you have. And you'll notice that we say repeat PRN. That's nursing for as needed. And one of the things that we've realized and that we've experienced in doing this kind of work is that we can always there's always space to improve our vision and mission. And as you go through this process, you usually will find things about yourself and about your community that you didn't know. And so as you begin to prioritize those things, that may lead you back to thinking, well, is our vision really focused enough? And does our mission really get us there? And so we're always sharpening the saw blade, as it were. So when you move into the second part, planning and implementation, basically this is taking what you've learned in the missional discernment process and clarifying the context, your capacity, and what God's calling you to do. What's God calling us to do, and how will a capital campaign help us achieve it? The next step, obviously, is planning the capital campaign. goals, objectives, milestones, responsibilities, how you're going to evaluate it, the contingencies that you have for if things start to go south, and looking at this both from the standpoint of practical and spiritual, because believe it or not, a capital campaign can be one of the most spiritual things that ever happens to a congregation, and it can be the most engaging thing for them with each other and with the community around them. We are going to be spending the rest of our time talking about these first 4 steps. So first, clarifying your congregation's vision and mission. You've heard the quote from Habakkuk, write the vision, make it plain so that a runner may read it. Before you start this process, it's really important to clarify your vision, what you want to be, and your vision, how you get there. And the reason you want to do that is so you can weigh your learnings against your vision and mission, and weigh your vision and mission against your learning. So spend a moment here on assessing your congregation's strengths and weaknesses. You need to look at 10 different things about assessing congregational vitality, the clarity of your vision and mission, how lay people are empowered or not, your missional context and your inclusion of your community, your readiness to change, your attitude towards conflict and dealing with differences, your worship and spirituality, your education and formation programs, what you do in terms of outreach and community service, how you handle your leadership, and how you handle your stewardship, both on an individual basis and for the community itself. We use a tool called the CVA, the Congregational Vitality Assessment, which looks at those 10 things, plus internal and external sustainability. And the idea is that we want to identify and kind of prioritize what are our biggest strengths and what are our biggest weaknesses, so that we can leverage our strengths. And that's a free tool. You can find it here at bit.ly/faithx-CVA free tool. It looks like this. On the left, it's a series of 70 questions that you answer that gives you a score for each of those areas of congregational life. So that's an important thing to do, and feel free to use that free tool. So now let's jump into exploring the missional opportunities and challenges. So when we do this, we look at 2 different study areas. One is the membership area. That's a 15-minute drive time. Why 15 minutes? Because 70% of your congregations will come from within this area. Now, we always get some pushback from that. People will say, but some of our people come from 30 miles away, and we're a destination congregation. Yes, that's probably true, but 15 minutes are where 70% of your people will come from. And the reason that's also important is because if you're a destination congregation and people are coming from 30 miles away, 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away, that's because they're coming for something that only you can uniquely offer them. And if they find something closer to them that gives them what you give them, then they will likely eventually go there. So that's your main membership area right there. And then the ministry area is the 5-minute drive time. Why that? Well, that's where you have the least competition from other congregations, and you have the most influence over that area, which means you have the most responsibility for serving that area. So let's take a closer look at St. James Episcopal Church in Wilmington. I'm going to increase this so that you can see. Here is the 15-minute drive time, and you can see we've highlighted a few things. Population growth is very high. This down here that you can't see in its entirety is volunteerism for charities. That's very high. Right next to it is giving to charities, and that's a little low compared to the national average. And we see that diversity is increasing. And we can look over here and see that there's a fairly good balance of what we call the wisdom generation, that's 65 plus, the current generation, which is 35 to 64, and the future generation, which is 0 to 34. And that's an important thing, that kind of balance, because if you have nothing but boomers in your area, you have the present, but not the future. If you have nothing but millennials and Gen Z in your area, you have the future, but no present, at least in terms of your ability to survive. So you'll probably notice a couple of things. These three things are real drivers of missional opportunity. So a very strong population growth rate that's increasing in diversity, and it's got a fairly decent balance. We've also highlighted over here population by school age range, and you can see that there's a higher percentage of the college age in this area than there is through the K through 12. So that tells you something there. That probably tells you it's a college town. So let's look at the 5-minute drive time area. That is the ministry area. It also has a very, very strong annual growth rate. Giving is about half the national average, and volunteering is about half the national average. Income is fairly low in that area. The household median income is about half the national average. The average net worth is about a quarter or less of the national average. So let me just pop this down a little bit. And as we go through these, Kay or David or Leslie, feel free to chime in. So as we met with Kay and the assistant rector at St. James earlier in the week, and these are what we identified as some of the opportunities and challenges. In the membership area, population opportunities were high population growth, increasing diversity. It's still not quite up to the national average, but it's fairly strongly increasing, and it's got higher volunteerism. In the ministry area, population opportunities, we've got also a higher, much higher than the national average population growth. Diversity is increasing even more. It's beginning to approach the national average. 58 now, 59 5 years from now. And you can see in this one that there's the school age ranges are much more balanced. Now, in terms of the membership area community challenges, you have a lower median income, lower average net worth, lower average giving, and the gap in school age ranges that we already spoke about. And in the ministry area, the 5-minute drive time area, there's lower median income, lower average net worth, lower average giving, and lower volunteering.
Ken, can I ask a question?
Yes, indeed. I was about to ask you if you had any.
So if you removed the college population, would these numbers look a lot different?
Well, I think that's actually, yes. I mean, what you're seeing here in the 5-minute drive time is the college age range pretty much removed, because the university is, I believe, is off to the northeast of the town itself. And so this is what the core of the town looks like. And the
Okay.
farther you move out, the more you hit the university students.
So the volunteerism and the, and the income and all, I wondered if that was influenced, but this is really without it. Okay.
Yes.
And remember too that these would be college students who have their permanent residency here, because people are counted where their permanent residence is.
Ah, okay. Great.
Because we have a college, community college downtown.
Yeah.
Obviously, that would not apply. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of those that are kind of that are residential students that live on campus and come from somewhere else, those are factored out of this.
Okay.
So
that's intentional, or just as a matter of?
That's just a matter of course. That's how the census picks it up.
Sure.
Yeah. So the census goes by your town of residence. So it's just good to know. It's neither good or bad, it just is. So we've been looking at the population in the area, but now let's look at some of the characteristics of the community. Let me back up for just a second. Some of the things that you can do, you might want to do, is look at the annual growth rate and see what's really driving that. It's probably difficult for you to see this. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Still can't see it that great, but this is families, this is households, and this is the population as a whole. So what you can see is while families is still pretty strong growth, non-family households, which would include families, is pushing it. So you've probably got that student population pushing that out. And you can also look at contributions to charity in a deeper way. This is contributions to religious organizations in the last month. How many people in that 15-minute drive time have volunteered in the last 12 months? And it's over 30,000. I mean, have given in the last, who have given to charity in the last 12 months, and that's 30,000. But it also tells you some other things too that come up close to that. The next most highest three are educational giving, donations to environmental giving, to health, and to social services. So that could actually tell you about maybe how you might want to be orienting your services, and how you might want to be thinking about how your building might be used. Because you might, for example, since health is an issue there, you might want to have an arrangement with the health department to use your building. You might want to be running a pre-K school, or another kind of school, which I think you guys already are, right? So this confirms something we already know. So let me put this back down. Look at the next one. And here's volunteering. Those who volunteered in any public activity over the last 12 months, that is about 80,000. Those who engaged in fundraising, about 20,000 people out there have engaged in fundraising. Maybe about 10 served on committees with local organizations, and close about 15,000 attended a public meeting in a town or school. So let's dig a little bit deeper also in terms of the population in the area. So here's the 15-minute drive time and the 5-minute drive time. And let's just pull over that population growth. These three bars here this is the growth up to the last census. This is the growth since the last census, and this is the projected growth. Very, very strong. And you can actually get down to what we call block groups, actual neighborhoods of people. And so that gives you a sense of where the growth actually is in your area. You can also look at generational predominance, for example. There's your 5 and 15-minute drive times. And there's where the different generations live. So the red areas are millennials, that they are predominant there. The blue areas are Gen Z. The green areas are boomers, and so on. So this actually gives you the ability to kind of, if you're trying to get more boomers or Gen Z, these are the neighborhoods you'd want to be focusing on. Now, obviously, we can't spend as much time as we'd like to walking you through everything that you'd need to look at, but that's an example of the things that you'd want to dig deeper into, because you know that the population growth is a big driver in your area, and you know that the population, the way that population is configured is an important thing as well. You might want to be looking at racial predominance. There might be other things that you might want to look at, depending upon the unique aspects of your community. So let's just look at the ministry area challenges. So I'm going to move this to the
5
side.
minutes.
What?
And 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So you can see here there are a lot of issues in the ministry area, the 5-minute drive time. Lots of people without vehicles. About 18% of the people do not have internet. Poverty is twice the national average. People on food stamps, twice the national average. You have here this represents high housing insecurity, because you have over 55% of the people in the area in rental housing. This is vacant housing units. There's 15% vacant, which means you're getting started on a fair amount of blight. This here is the percentage. This is on the top, this is mortgage burden, and this is rent burden. And so you have a fairly high mortgage burden. That's how much the percentage of your income that you're spending on mortgage. And this is the percentage of people who are paying more than 30% of their income for rent. So that's a real challenge there. Crime is twice the national average. Medical coverage is low. Households with disabilities is high. The ability to exercise, which is a forecast of health, is also low. The unemployment rate is about maybe 30% above the national average. So you can see here how we identified from this, and from looking at the same issues in the 15-minute drive time, what the challenges are. So more households with no vehicles, lower access to internet, poverty rate, food stamps. We talked about all of those. And then the membership area, the community challenges are higher than average poverty rate, high housing insecurity, also not as much, but still pretty high at 45%, a higher rent burden in the membership area, 52% compared to the national average of 46, and a higher crime rate. So the next step then is to prioritize. And this is where you begin to take what you've learned and begin to see how that matches up with your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, how the opportunities and challenges match up to your congregational strengths and weaknesses, and ask the following questions. And so I'm going to, at this point, pose these questions to Kay and David and to Leslie, and invite them to see to respond to what opportunities and challenges they see and how they align with the mission and vision of the congregation. Any thoughts, guys?
Well, generally, linking this to a capital campaign. So why would this be information that would be interesting? So if you've got a roof leak, and if there are things you have to do, and so does the congregation, first of all, with CORE, we actually have a completely separate phase for a capital campaign that is discernment. Often in secular fundraising, you go immediately to a feasibility study. But for a church community, you're talking about the whole body being a part of this campaign. So it's important to have people understand and buy into the projects you need to do, and the why has to be what's going on under that roof. Many churches are in the position of now having to want to be into the community, want to be more relevant to the community, and don't know how. They kind of go to the usual, well, there's already a soup kitchen at this church, or other things maybe you've tried, but you with this information, you really can start to think about, okay, what can we do about some of these issues, and how close are they, and did we know this? I'm not from Wilmington, and that's why it's great to have Kay and David here, because they've been at their church a long time. So I'm going to let them sort of look at some of this and see if any light bulbs went off. But I just wanted to put that in the context of discerning during a capital campaign.
Thank you.
Well, I'll go next and say that first, we are more than likely several, maybe 3 years out from a capital campaign. From what I have observed in strategic planning, we would regard each year of annual giving to be a step toward a comprehensive campaign to include a capital campaign. And so we should be mindful even now as we organize for a more aggressive and focused annual campaign in the coming year to see how it will inform a capital campaign a few years out. And then I'd say that the strategic plan, as it relates to both of those, an annual and a capital campaign, is certainly focused on growth of the church, increasing the size of the church, taking advantage of the increased population and popularity of Wilmington. And at the same time, must address in some fashion the the neighborhood that we're in. All the things you said about our neighborhood 5 minutes away are right. And I certainly don't think that we have thought about how we could grow our church 5 minutes away as much as we've thought about how we could grow it 15 or 20 minutes away. So, seeing it as you have presented it helps me realize the challenges that obtain from our strategic plan, not just in terms of a capital campaign, not just in terms of an annual campaign, but in terms of implementation of the strategic plan with regard to growth and expanding our congregation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So what do you see the challenges being in terms of implementing your strategic plan, and how do those challenges and the opportunities you're seeing, how is that going to change your annual plan? How might that influence how you will work from year to year?
Right. You have just summarized what I've said, or are you posing that as a question?
I'm posing that as a question. You've talked about it, generally as a kind of an overview, but I'm just wondering what challenges do you see to implementing your annual plan,
Right.
and how does what you know here benefit you in that?
Oh, it helps a great deal. I can't speak, and I'm very cautious, careful right now about appearing to speak for the strategic planning group. I participated. I served as a kind of stenographer or secretary, and before I knew it, I was the spokesperson for the group. And now that we have presented the plan to the community, we've done that in sessions from January through a couple of weeks ago. We've done it through written and video formats, and in a sense, I have completed my work as a member of the committee, and I certainly don't want to appear to be speaking for it. That's really important to me, that everyone understand that, because I'm interested in all this, but I'm speaking from from the bleacher section of the stadium. But that said, I can see right away that we have a lot within our church to decide about the extent to which we want to be a church for the immediate community. We have 5 minutes away a brisk walk away from the church, some of the nicest, oldest historical houses in the country, from an old port city history. But we also have, as you described it, near Blight. I think we would like to expand our range in both directions. I think it would be nice even more to be a neighborhood church to which people walked every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
That means not just from the antebellum houses of a port city, but from an underserved community as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's speaking. I can't say where our congregation is with that, but that seems to be the challenge, and your data and even the visuals help me see that better.
It's always wise when you're in the bleachers not to speak for the team, right?
Right, right.
Well, I would add one thing to what Dave has said in terms of challenge. Not our church is 300 plus years old, and when it was first built, it was a neighborhood church. The people from those houses that he described walked to that church. They were the ones that supported it financially and every other way. And that's changed dramatically. Certainly that is not the case in the church that we go to now. That said, we would like very much to be the church for the neighborhood. And seeing what challenges we face in making that happen is very helpful, because I think we all have preconceived notions of how we're going to bring those folks in. And having data in front of us helps us with specific planning. The other part of this is that the growth of Wilmington is not downtown. In yours, there seems to be some, but most of it is not. And so we don't want to deny that by not even appealing to some of the growth that we see in other areas. But I think it's going to take two different plans to attract two different groups of people. And this information will be extremely helpful, I think, as we look at this objectively and not emotionally, which is what
Exactly.
most of us do. Yeah.
Well, on the population thing, one of the on population growth, what I would comment on, having gone through those slides, if you will, that the biggest area of growth is the 15-minute drive time. But even if you roll back and look at the 5-minute drive time, generally anything over 1% growth projection in a 5-year period is considered very, very strong. And you're looking at a projected growth in the 5-minute drive time, the ministry area, you're looking at a growth of 1.6, I believe. So that's very significant. Mary?
So a couple of questions that have come in. Would a church identify a number of areas to address, or better to identify one challenge, like affordable housing, and just work toward that?
Well, that's why this step is about prioritizing. Our understanding of how to make something like this work is that you can't do everything for everybody infinitely. You have to prioritize, you have to focus down. And what we're trying to provide here with these questions is how you make that choice, because the previous steps have really helped you look at what the challenges are out there and what the opportunities are out there. But then you've got to come down to like 1, 2, 3 things and be really clear about what the priorities are between those. And what some of the questions that you have to ask yourself are, not only are those the challenges that you see and the opportunities you see, but who else out there, other congregations, are already doing that? Or are there other congregations that might want to work with you, or organizations that might want to work with you on some of those issues? Which of those do you have the knowledge and skills and gifts and calling as a congregation to deal with? And so, yes, I always like to suggest that people start small, that people often don't think small enough as opposed to large enough. Because if you really are thinking about how change takes place, it starts small and grows. And so what you're trying to do is to focus on finding an area that you can really make an impact and succeed, so that you can continue to do that and maybe expand that. So especially in the current, in the current space that we find ourselves in coming out of COVID, we really don't know what's going to work. And so we really have to experiment with it. And that's why it's important to be, to clarify your vision and let your vision help you decide what it is that you want to attack, and then experiment like hell.
Can you talk a little bit about how you gain neighborhood buy-in?
Well, you gain neighborhood buy-in by being a good neighbor to the neighborhood. One of the things that we suggest when you're working with this data is not to assume, well, first, don't assume that you know what you think you know. Don't assume that that's the full picture. And don't assume that what we're showing you in terms of the statistics is the real picture either, because it only can tell you a certain amount of information. What really gets buy-in is if you take that information, make some hypotheses about what the neighborhood needs, and go out and talk to people and ask people in the neighborhood, this is what we see. We've been studying the neighborhood demographically, and we've got some ideas that we think might help, but you need to tell us. One congregation that did this, they thought that education, there's a new congregation. They sought that K through 12, but especially the first several grades was a key need in the community. But then they went out and went door to door asking people, so what do you think? And they got a very strong buy-in from the community. So doing that sort of thing, making sure that you're looking at their needs and that you're asking them to verify them for you, builds buy-in.
So, Ken, I was thinking of a couple of things. I believe, I haven't been to Wilmington yet, but I believe St. James has a fairly large campus or land or buildings. Often churches are looking at better use of their buildings. So if there is I think your idea of talking to another church or talking to some social services, if you're talking about a 5-minute radius, what is going on as far as that needs help? Could they use space? Also, do you have people in the church who would love to volunteer tutoring? Or, is there a way to offer maybe even a social service space to operate within your area? It's, you want to align this with your vision and mission, yes, but it can also be offering a home or a space. And then through that, what grows? What volunteer opportunities? How do you engage with this and the people? I just wonder if Kay and David and Chris had a chance to actually think something along the lines that says, we could do this because we're equipped. I don't know if you got to any specifics talking.
The better use of our facility is one of our key strategies in this strategic plan. So thank you for pointing it out, whether in that context or just in the abstract. It's very apt, and I think it's even more so in the context of the pandemic. I think everybody's going to be looking at space in a different way in the next in the next 5 years. Space that, just to be simple about it, space that was office space 2 years ago may be empty space 2 years from now. And so right on, I think that's a very important opportunity for us, because we do have a great deal of beautiful and available space at St. James.
And that's an oft overlooked thing, when
Yeah.
we look at better utilizing our building or using that to generate funds, we often do it more opportunistically than strategically.
Right. Very good
And
point.
so we have people that are actually taking up space. They're actually giving us money, but are they achieving the vision and mission of the congregation?
Right.
It's much better if those things are aligned.
Very true.
And with a looming hurricane season right around the corner, there are a lot of organizations in town who looked to St. James after Florence, especially for space to store things. So it's not just as a result of the pandemic that we're thinking about it, but it's a situation that's probably going to get worse before it gets better in terms of preparation for hurricanes and what we could do to help organizations who don't have space to store things.
So one way of looking at this is the more that you make yourself a community space, and the community knows that you're creating a space for the community in your midst, that also generates buy-in from the community.
Very good. May I ask another
Sure.
related question, but it's different from what we've been talking about so far. And that is about that college population, which I understand is not included in your data, but which we have regarded as a potentially significant body of people, of resources, of talent, of energy, the works. I mean, we've got 20,000 students at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. We have their faculty and their staff. And to my knowledge, our church has not tapped into or even expressed an interest in that community. I don't know where the church goers among students go. There are a couple of churches nearby and a couple that might be more appealing to a 19 or 20-year-old who a person of faith. But we've talked about it in terms of talent. We would enjoy having musicians or choristers or speakers from the university. And my question then would be, in your experience, how does a church, particularly an old downtown church like ours, appeal to a college or university community?
Well, and I'll mention something, and then
excuse me,
would welcome Mary and Leslie to dive in as well. One of the things that, a couple of things I would say. One is that to engage the student population, I believe it's most effective when you do it there rather than in the church. It's also one of the things that you have to be aware of when you're going into a university is that you have to set your expectations right, because probably 75–80% of the people at the university actually are resident elsewhere. And they're going to do their 4 years and then they're going to move along. So you may want to engage them, but don't get disappointed if they don't want to sign up and be members, because they know they're going to go home. And then the other thing is, we often focus on the universities to the detriment of looking at the community colleges. And the nice thing about community colleges is everybody at the community college is local. And so any engagement that you make at the community college actually is more likely to bring people into your congregation over the long term. And because more minorities attend, and lower income people attend community colleges, you're going to be able to widen out your base of people that you're engaging in a much wider way.
Yeah, I would add to that just a couple of things. One is, always remembering that growth doesn't happen for growth's sake,
Yes.
but growth happens as a result of following your mission and your vision and responding to God's call and how you are to serve and engage in the community. And so the question would be like, what is your ministry to and with college students and university students, and is there a relationship there to foster, to build on, to grow? I'll just say, when you mentioned the benefits of engaging that population, everything you said would be beneficial to the congregation, but you didn't say anything about the other side of the relationship. Like, what do you have to offer to those students? What could they be engaged in, and how could they join you in your mission? Because that's what people respond to.
I would second that, Mary. Often churches have a goal of growing their membership. And I've seen out of, many times the church has said, well, we've all met, here are our priorities. We want to increase outreach, all of these things. And we want to grow 25% by 2025. And that, I never feel like that is a goal. I said, that's a result of what you're doing. So what is it that you're going to do that wows people enough to say, I want to be there? Because they're doing great things. And I've heard, I've seen them in the community. So, I think part of growth is what we're talking about is going out into the community. That's hard to do, let's face it, with a church of volunteers. Who's going to say, okay, come on, Kay, we're heading downtown and we're going to talk to all these, social services and other churches and all. It's usually a staff or a clergy thing to do. So it's not as easy as that. And I think that's why Ken is saying it has to be simple. What is one thing that we could tweak and do, that we're prepared to do, that we're equipped to do, that could make a difference in the community, and a difference to our membership and being more blessed through the experience, that's your reward. And then I think people see, wow, they're doing great, I want to be a part of that. So that the growth comes that way.
Yeah, I would see and raise what you guys both said, and that is, if your goal is if you're going out in the community and your goal by doing that is to improve your membership, you will fail. You will fail.
Here's an example in the chat. Amy shared that a monastery near her gives the local college kids free breakfast with the monks once a week. And then they're invited to attend matins. And some of them do stay and do that. So they're building a relationship there. Maybe we have time for one more quick question. Amy was also asking about why do discernment before feasibility?
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that question. So many, when people go to feasibility, many firms say, well, we do a discernment within the feasibility study. Churches, again, are at such differing stages of their discernment. Some have been doing this with their parish for 4 years and they have blueprints and they know why they need to build something and they're on their way. Others are like, we need to discern why bad carpeting needs to be replaced. But also we want to find, really explore something that we could do. So all of this information is informing a church of challenges and opportunities. It's up to that church to say, okay, let's say we are going to use our building. It's going to take time to go and find somebody who fits, somebody who really could use that building. Now, maybe that building needs to be altered somehow to accommodate this group. Let's say it's tutoring and now we need computers or we need divided rooms or whatever that is. Now that goes into your planning and that takes a while. You now have to figure out what that looks like, get quotes, find out what the cost is. And then a feasibility, I often say a feasibility study will tell you whether you discerned well enough. Do people know about this? Do people feel like they've been involved in the process? Have they been able to weigh in and struggle with some of the questions about the why? Why are we here? Why are we church? Why do people care? And then they will say, yes, I'm in favor of this. I've heard about the projects, and they may be able to indicate a range of giving. I feel a feasibility study is a waste of money without a thorough discernment on the why, what we're doing, how much it's going to cost, and then you can prioritize those and you get a real sense of how much you could raise and the enthusiasm that people have for projects.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. And thank you, Kate and David, and thank you all for coming and joining us today. We are out of time, but you can stay engaged with us if you'd like to ask questions. You can email us at info@faithx.net. The resources we talked about, you can see the links to those. I wanted to remind everybody that everybody who attended this session will get a copy of the video. We'll get a link to the webinar video. And those of you who requested it will get a neighborhood missional intelligence report for your location and relevant data maps for that location. We will need your address. So if you haven't put your address in the registration, email that to us. And some people have asked if they didn't sign up in advance for the resources and want them now, can you do that still? Yes, you can do that at the webinar rate, and just email us and let us know. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Everyone. Appreciate your time today. We'll see you at our next webinar.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
All right. Leslie, you want to stay on for a minute?
Sure.
I'm trying.
I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording. Where do we stop recording?